Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Mioch and you are watching A News. Let's have a look at the headlines. Trump's 15-point plan passed to Tehran as Iran says U.S. is, quote, negotiating with itself. Danish Prime Minister resigns and coalition talks begin following close election. 2 suspects arrested following arson attack on Jewish charity ambulances in London. Thank you for tuning in. We start with the Middle East. Israel and Iran exchanged fresh airstrikes as Iran's military denied negotiations are underway with the United States to end the war. Iran's Joint Military Command spokesperson said the U.S. is, quote, negotiating with itself. Tehran has previously said it cannot negotiate with Washington, citing past strikes during previous rounds of negotiations. Now, as the Iranian military spokesperson mocked U.S. attempts at a ceasefire deal, the Trump administration has reportedly sent a 15-point ceasefire plan to Iran through Islamabad.
An Iranian official says Pakistan delivered a U.S. ceasefire proposal to Iran on Wednesday, Reuters reports. Although no venue has been decided for talks between Tehran and Washington to end the war, the source said Turkey is helping to find ways to resolve the conflict, with either Turkey or Pakistan under consideration as a possible host. This follows earlier reports that the US has put forward a 15-point peace plan aimed at resolving the conflict in the Middle East. The New York Times, citing 2 officials briefed on the diplomacy, said the proposal outlined steps addressing Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, as well as maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz. Israeli media reports say the proposal includes the dismantling of all existing Iranian nuclear capabilities. According to a source, it would also require no production of weapons-grade nuclear material on Iranian soil, with all enriched material handed over to the International Atomic Energy Agency within an agreed timeline. It said Iran's Natanz, Isfahan and Fordow nuclear sites would be decommissioned and destroyed, and the IAEA would get full access to all information in regards to Iran's nuclear program, adding that Iran would cease the funding, directing and arming of its proxies in the region. In addition, the Strait of Hormuz will remain open and a free maritime zone, and no one will block it. The ceasefire plan was submitted to Iran by intermediaries from Pakistan, who have offered to host renewed negotiations between Washington and Tehran. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said Pakistan stands ready to be the host to facilitate meaningful and conclusive talks for a comprehensive settlement of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The proposal comes as the US military is preparing to call up at least 1,000 more troops from the 82nd Airborne Division to supplement some 50,000 troops already in the region. It's the latest addition of American troops after US officials last week said thousands of Marines aboard several Navy ships will be heading to the region. Iran's reaction remains unclear. Tehran has denied that any negotiations are taking place, even as Donald Trump delays his self-imposed deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The country's chokehold on the crucial waterway has snarled international shipping, sent fuel prices soaring, and raised fears for the global economy.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials are saying Iran's leadership structure is in chaos, with uncertainty surrounding Mojtaba Khamenei, who they believe to be dead or seriously injured after the strikes that killed his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Donald Trump has rejected him as a legitimate successor and is pressing Tehran towards urgent peace talks. A News' Ubay Shabanda reports from Washington.
U.S. officials say that the Iranian government is facing major internal chaos and significant challenges in communicating within what is left of the Islamic Republic's leadership structure. President Trump said that he does not consider Mujtaba Khamenei, the son of the late Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed by American and Israeli strikes, as the legitimate new leader. Mujtaba Khamenei has not publicly revealed himself and is believed to be either dead or severely injured due to the strikes that killed his father. The Trump administration is pushing Tehran for in-person peace talks that could take place in Pakistan this week. Trump has said that Iran must agree to move all highly enriched uranium out of the country and permanently shut down any remaining nuclear enrichment capabilities. The offer for talks could prove to be the first major opportunity to end the conflict. President Trump has said that the administration would be willing to work with the Iranian Speaker of Parliament, Mohammad Ghalibaf. In the meantime, the U.S. continues to pour in additional reinforcements into the region, including thousands of more troops. Another major demand by the U.S., Iran must agree to the establishment of a free maritime zone in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is believed to have launched drone attacks against ships carrying crude oil in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as laying undersea mines. Trump told reporters that he believes that the U.S. has largely won the conflict and managed to achieve a form of regime change in Iran. Mubi Shabander, A News, Washington.
As global fuel supply chains remain disrupted due to the Iran war, the Philippines became the first country to formally declare a national energy emergency in response to soaring fuel prices. A host of other countries are also implementing measures.
In the Philippines, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has declared a state of national energy emergency, warning of an imminent danger to the country's energy supply as the Middle East conflict continues to disrupt global markets. A government task force has been formed to ensure the supply and distribution of fuel and other essential goods, while authorities have been granted emergency powers to secure imports and stabilize availability. The measure will remain in effect for 1 year amid rising oil prices and mounting supply chain risks. Japan is stepping up emergency measures, with Sanai Takaichi announcing the release of national oil reserves from Thursday to offset supply disruptions as part of a coordinated effort with the International Energy Agency. Global oil prices have surged to their highest since 2022 following strikes on Iran, while the closure of the Strait of Hormuz continues to disrupt key shipments. Across regions, the effects of the crisis are increasingly being felt. In Kenya, the fuel sector is under pressure, with retailers reporting supply gaps affecting around a fifth of outlets as global shortages filter into local markets.
Because of the crisis that we are getting ourselves into, the market reacts to the realities, not the arrangements. And so the realities are there's a supply gap.
In Chile, long queues have formed at fuel stations as motorists rush to fill up ahead of expected sharp price increases, adding strain on already stretched households.
This is hitting us very hard. We depend on fuel, and we are going to do our best to make sure this price hike does not get passed on to the parents, because things are already tough enough as it is.
Meanwhile, in Slovenia, the government has introduced limits on fuel purchases to curb hoarding and ease pressure on supplies. Drivers are now restricted to fixed daily amounts. As the conflict involving Iran continues to disrupt key global shipping routes, energy pressures are now spreading further across Asia. India is seeing surging fuel demand, with long queues and delays at petrol stations amid panic buying, while China is also witnessing motorists lining up ahead of expected price increases as global oil costs climb. The aviation sector is increasingly affected, with airlines cutting flights and raising fares as fuel prices surge, with warnings of billions of dollars in additional costs if the situation persists.
Well, the Middle East war is beginning to hit the British economy as well, with officials warning households could face higher energy bills in the months ahead, despite a temporary drop in prices for most of the country. Zainab Farajzadeh reports.
Energy bills for millions of households across England, Scotland and Wales are set to fall from April, but that relief is expected to be short-lived. Under the energy price cap set by Ofgem, bills will drop for 3 months, offering temporary respite for consumers. However, there is likely to be a big jump in gas and electricity costs over the summer. A key factor is disruption to global energy supply routes, including the Strait of Hormuz, through which around a fifth of the world's oil and gas normally passes. Chancellor Rachel Reeves told MPs on Tuesday that the conflict will have a direct impact on the UK. Even so, the country is not involved militarily. The government says support will be offered to those who need it most if prices spike. That marks a shift from previous support packages, such as the energy price guarantee introduced in 2022, which applied to all households. The government says it is working with departments, including work and pensions, to ensure any help is targeted effectively. At the same time, a new anti-profiteering framework is being developed aimed at giving regulators more power to act against companies accused of exploiting rising prices. But questions remain over how much support the government can afford, with opposition figures warning the UK economy is already under pressure. For now, households are being warned that while bills may fall in the coming weeks, further increases later this year remain a strong possibility as the global situation continues to unfold. Zainab Farajzadeh, News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
Still with Britain, 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of arson after 4 Jewish charity-owned ambulances were set on fire in North London on Monday morning. The men, aged 45 and 47, are being held on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life, the Metropolitan Police said in a statement. The investigation into the attack is ongoing, with CCTV footage of the incident suggesting that there were at least 3 people involved. Earlier, authorities said the attack was being treated as an anti-Semitic hate crime. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has submitted her government's resignation after her coalition suffered a defeat in the general election. The royal palace confirmed the move on Wednesday. Political parties will now begin negotiations to form a new government. These talks could be difficult and may take time. It is still unclear whether Frederiksen will remain in power or if another leader will form the next government. Turning to the war in Ukraine, Kyiv reported shooting down some 1,000 drones in the span of 24 hours, calling it one of the heaviest air attacks since the start of the war. The 17th century St. Andrew's Church in Lviv, part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, also came under a Russian attack, Ukraine's Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko said. Russia's defense ministry said its forces struck Ukrainian military and industrial sites, airfields and other targets, and also claimed it downed hundreds of Ukrainian UAVs. The attacks show that Russia has no real intention of seeking peace, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said. He called for increased international pressure on Russia, warning that only strong action and significant losses could push the Kremlin to end the war.
The scale of this attack clearly shows that Russia has no real intention of ending this war. And considering that Russia is also helping the Iranian regime carry out strikes across the region, the conclusion is obvious. Without additional and strong pressure on Russia, without tangible losses for them there in Moscow, they will not develop any desire to move away from the war or return to peace. It is precisely pressure that is currently lacking. On the contrary, there are signals encouraging Russia to continue what they have been doing for years, only increasing aggression. The partial easing of sanctions against Russia works in Russia's interest to continue the war. Russians will earn at least $2 billion in just these weeks from the easing of sanctions. This is dangerous for everyone.
Authorities in Estonia say a drone struck a chimney at a local power station with no injuries reported and no damage to the facility. The incident occurred around the same time a Ukrainian drone attack set fire to oil facilities at Russia's Baltic seaport of Ust-Luga. Latvian authorities also said 2 drones crossed into the country's airspace, one from Russia and the other from Belarus. Elsewhere, Cuba is facing mounting energy and economic hardships due to a U.S. oil blockade. Humanitarian aid is now reaching Havana by sea, as the Caribbean nation's president said no fuel had entered Cuba in 3 months.
A humanitarian flotilla carrying 30 tons of aid has arrived in Havana as the country faces a deepening energy and economic crisis. The vessel, named Maguro, docked on Tuesday along the Malecon promenade, where officials and activists gathered to welcome the shipment. It is part of the 3-ship Nuestra America convoy, which set sail from Mexico's port of Progreso on March 20th, with carrying medical supplies, solar panels, and non-perishable food collected by solidarity groups. Volunteers and local workers began unloading the supplies shortly after arrival, with 2 more ships expected in the coming days.
This is an immense emotion for us being here because we know Cuba is the most solidarity-driven country in the world. We come in return, a country that sent medical brigades, teachers, and made so many gestures of solidarity, now needs our support.
A day earlier, a Mexican Navy ship, the Huasteco, left Veracruz carrying additional humanitarian aid as Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum pledged support and explored fuel supplies to Cuba, despite tariff warnings from Donald Trump.
I know both very well.
Cuba's growing dependence on aid follows months of severe fuel shortages. In January, Washington moved to cut off Venezuelan oil exports to the island after taking action against Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela had long supplied Cuba with oil on favorable terms, making the sudden halt a major blow. Since then, Cuba's energy system has come under intense pressure. The national grid collapsed twice in a single week, leaving large parts of Havana without power.
Besides the fact that there's no food, there are thousands of resources that don't exist in this country. Now with these blackouts, the little food people have spoils, and you don't know what to do anymore. You don't know if you can buy food for a month, or for a week, or for a day, because you never know when the electricity will go out. 1 minute, everything is lit up, and the next minute, everything goes down.
While electricity has been partly restored, prolonged blackouts remain common. With fuel scarce and infrastructure stretched, the island is now increasingly dependent on international aid shipments to ease the crisis.
After a short break, we'll be taking a closer look at the latest developments out of the Middle East and the possible role of Pakistan as a mediator in the conflict. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching A News. With news and reports that Pakistan is emerging as a viable mediator in the US and Israel war with Iran, Islamabad is still dealing with its own conflict with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Joining us now to examine the possible role of Pakistan in ending the war in the Middle East is President of the Institute of Peace and Diplomatic Studies in Islamabad, Farhad Asif. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Now, with all these reports coming in that possibly as early as this week, talks between the US and Iran might take place in Pakistan, what are your thoughts on the choice of the venue?
First of all, thank you so much. This is a very important and historic time for Pakistan as we are the center of the stage. Islamabad is at the hub of everything that's going on in the region. Primarily, why? Because Pakistan has recently elevated its diplomatic relationship not only with the US, as you must have seen that over the time period we have witnessed how the relationship between both sides had elevated to a normal cold or lukewarm to a much warmer as before after the recently Trump administration came to power. And then we have also witnessed that recently Pakistan has also elevated its relationship with Iran, with Central Asian states recently, with Gulf countries. There has been a robust diplomacy happening, and the conversations had been continued. Over the time period, what we have witnessed is that the role of Islamabad in its diplomatic circle, its diplomatic engagement with the community not only at the regional level but at the global scale has been increasing. You must have seen that Pakistan has also joined the Trump administration's Board of Peace initiative as well, where the plan was that to jointly, control or make a peace in the region through what was happening in Palestine and the Israel war that was happening. Similarly, now before even the war, the war began, there was also a hint from the Trump administration about possible presence and conversation with presence of Pakistan as a possible mediator. Why this mediation is important in international relations? When we look at the mediators, there's a need for the mediator to have the trust of all the parties. If you look at how the U.S. is trusting Pakistan, Iran is also trusting Pakistan, and of course the Gulf countries we have witnessed as well. There has been regular and robust conversation and telephonic calls between the countries. Last night, I've also seen that there was a call from from Malaysia and also from the EU head as well to understand the regional dynamics and how Pakistan is, making the course to change the de-escalate this conflict. And primarily why Islamabad is chosen because of the reason of how the parties are trusting Pakistan for its diplomatic presence.
Farhad, is this trust that specific diplomatic strength to mediate this particular conflict? Does Islamabad have any more characteristics that could help here?
Apart from that trust, which is very much as base of all the conflict, to resolve, because why I should be trusting a party to resolve or to listen to my takes. For example, Iran and Pakistan, for the longer period of time, there has been regular conversations happening, although both sides had the mistrust as well. But recently, we have witnessed that there has been robust conversation. You have Pakistan has built a continuous communication with regime in Tehran, and of course, several levels of conversations has been done. Similarly, as I said earlier, there has been trust from Washington as well on Pakistan, and similarly. Another very important aspect for trusting in such a delicate way is also that Pakistan has built its rapport as a not only as a diplomatic level but also as a security level as well. You have witnessed that this increase of the trust, this increase of the Pakistan's global presence was happened right after when Pakistan has made a substantial mark over our regional tussle that been happening between Pakistan and India after May incidents. This has been elevated. This has created a more confidence on Pakistan. How Trump administration, how the regional allies will begin looking towards Pakistan as someone who is able to securitize not only its own state but also can help elevated. Similarly, what has happened between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia as well. I would really like to reiterate here that the defense agreement between both sides, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, was also made possible, although there was conversation happening for so long. But this has, spiral up. This has been speeded up after the May tussle between Pakistan and India, where Pakistan has showed its muscle of its strategic presence, its strategic, elevation of its power in the region, primarily.
Well, you mentioned that incident with India, but How involved do you expect Islamabad to get here right now? And do you think it might impact its conflict that it has with the Taliban in any way?
To be very honest, it's a very delicate time for Pakistan. Also accepting, as Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif has also reiterated, that they are kind of ready or honored to host direct or indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran in Islamabad. And in the statements that we have been hearing, the willingness of Islamabad to facilitate these meaningful conversations. But at the same time, if you look at the dynamics of it, it's very delicate. At the same time, you are a mediator between three larger major actors, primarily US, Israel, Iran, and then Saudi Arabia, and many other Gulf countries. And they are trusting you, but at the same time, there can be any kind of mismove may spiral back and can create a lot of challenges for Pakistan in terms of security related challenges. We're also having a war ongoing, although there is a ceasefire. There's a delicate ceasefire. It's called as negative peace between both Pakistan and Afghanistan. There's a call for from both sides, from the both religious leaders, has called for the ceasefire and continue for a while, because there's a possibility of the talks happening in the behind. The talks may be possible between both Pakistan and Afghanistan, but at the same time, it's also a delicate balance. So, challenging for Pakistan and Islamabad is at this point in time is that how people in Islamabad will be able to handle conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and also be able to play their role, overstretching themselves to the conflict, which is already very complex and very delicate, as complex as what is going on in between Iran, US, and Israel, of course, and the Gulf countries that are involved. So primarily, this can embolden, I suspect, and also can also reduce the conflict. But based on the fact that how Pakistan has positioned itself to be a mediator, there may be a possibility that can replicate similarly what has happened. I shared with you that you take a position on a conflict, and then you can alleviate your own position to a certain conflict as well. Which can happen there between Pakistan and Afghanistan as well.
Farhad, we're just now receiving word that Iran has officially confirmed that they received those 15 points from Donald Trump, this peace plan, and they are reviewing it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this plan itself. It covers a lot. Do you expect both sides willing to discuss everything in one go?
I think this is a very, very comprehensive plan, although there's not a detailed plan has been revealed so much. But what I'm seeing is that it's a very challenging plan as well. If you look at the plan, it is like a de-escalation of the both sides. There's a lot of steps that are already been the challenges that has led to this war. So going further for the negotiations and dialogue, you need to build trust. And similarly, what I'm looking at is that there's a lack of trust on both sides, although they have received these plans. But when you look at the regional dynamics, you must have seen that there's a lot of buildup going on. Marines are there. There are also 50,000 Marines are already there, 300,000. Several hundred thousand are already reached. There's a possibility of larger escalation of the conflict. I think that we are entering into a very delicate and very dangerous times because there is a lot of build-up. Mistrust is ongoing between both sides. I see that there's a plan, but I don't see that there's kind of a at the end of the day, if there's a mistrust and mediators like Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, or many others can jump in to help these resolve conflicts or create a trust. What I'm basing on trust is that unless and until you do not have trust, because earlier the negotiations that were going on between US and Iran, where Oman was negotiating, and I was witnessing that, and I was looking and reading, and I was following all the developments going on. And when I looked at it, the moment this war conversation was happening, the attack happened. So there's a lot of mistrust is there, primarily, which is based on the fact that how the plans of coming to Islamabad, people from Iran, Tehran, or people from Washington, there's a lack of possibility of coming to a negotiating tables unless this trust will not be built. You can continue sending plans, but depends on the trust that how Tehran will be looking at it, because there is a push as well from Pakistan and from Turkey, and there is a conversation happening, and there is talks this morning as well. But at the same time, we need to look at how this plan will, implemented or trust being built.
Farhad, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with
Yes,
your
my
insight
pleasure.
and analysis.
Thank you. Pleasure.
After a short break, we'll be taking a look at the major stories coming out of the region. Welcome back. Afghanistan has released an American citizen who had been detained for more than a year, describing the move as a humanitarian gesture during the Eid al-Fitr holiday. The release came following appeals by the American's family and international coordination. For more on that, we go to Kabul and our correspondent Tamim Bahis.
The Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs says American national Dennis Coyle has been released on humanitarian grounds after the country's Supreme Court ruled that the time he had already served was sufficient. Officials say the decision came after a request from his family, particularly his mother, seeking clemency ahead of Eid al-Fitr. And he was later handed over to his family and a U.S. delegation in Kabul. Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi also met in Kabul with former U.S. Special Representative Zalmay Khalilzad, UAE Ambassador Saif al-Katbi, and a representative of the detainees' family. During the meeting, Muttaqi said foreign nationals are detained only for violations of Afghan laws and released after judicial procedures are completed, adding that Afghanistan is ready to improve consular cooperation. Authorities thanked the UAE for helping facilitate the release and also acknowledged Qatar's role in supporting communication between officials and the detainees' family. U.S. officials confirmed that the release came without any deal or payment, while welcoming the move, but noting that Washington is still seeking the return of other detained Americans. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Turkey says natural gas deliveries from Iran are continuing despite reports of a disruption following strikes on Iran's largest gas field. Adam Moro has more on that in Istanbul.
Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar has denied reports that natural gas flows from Iran to Turkey had been halted, saying deliveries were continuing and supply remained secure. Speaking to reporters after a Tuesday cabinet meeting, Bayraktar said Iranian gas flows to Turkey were ongoing, adding that the country's storage facilities were currently about 71% full. Earlier the same day, Bloomberg had cited unnamed sources as saying that Iranian gas exports to Turkey had been halted following Israeli-U.S. strikes on Iran's South Pars gas field. Iran is one of Turkey's key gas suppliers, typically accounting for between 10 and 15% of annual imports. The two countries are linked via the Tabriz-Ankara pipeline, which has historically provided an important share of Turkey's wintertime gas supply, although Turkey also imports large volumes of liquefied natural gas from both Russia and Azerbaijan. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, meanwhile, has said the ongoing closure of the Strait of Hormuz has caused significant disruptions to the global economy. Speaking to reporters in Ankara, he said the international system was undergoing what he described as fundamental change, with the emergence of what he called new alliances. Erdogan added that Turkey was navigating the regional conflict cautiously and was determined to avoid being drawn into what he called a ring of fire. Since the regional conflict began last month, Iran has effectively restricted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, saying that what it describes as non-hostile vessels may transit the strait if they coordinate with Iranian authorities. According to Turkish officials, at least one Turkish-owned ship has been permitted to pass through the strait, while a number of others are still awaiting Tehran's permission to transit the strategic waterway. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
A new batch of grain from Russia going to Armenia is making its way through Azerbaijan. 5 wagons carrying 350 tons of wheat passed Azerbaijan's Bilajari station. The train is en route to Georgia before continuing towards Armenia. To date, more than 23,000 tons of grain, around 1,000 tons of fertilizer, and 68 tons of buckwheat have been shipped by train from Russia to Armenia via Azerbaijan. Kazakhstan says it is ready to deepen energy cooperation with the United States by expanding export routes across the Caspian Sea and boosting investment. Kazakhstan's energy minister made the remarks during talks with U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright on the sidelines of an event in Houston. The two spoke on energy security, alternative corridors, and the Caspian region's role in global supply chains. U.S. investments in Kazakhstan's energy sector now exceed $60 billion, with major projects involving ExxonMobil and Chevron. A new Eurasian Development Bank report warns that Central Asia's energy systems remain highly vulnerable as heavy reliance on single energy sources combines with growing climate risks across the region. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova has more on that in Tashkent.
A new analysis by the Eurasian Development Bank shows that between 60 and 90% of electricity in Central Asian countries is generated from a single source, creating structural vulnerabilities in the region's energy systems. In hydropower-dependent countries such as Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, declining water levels during dry seasons have led to reduced electricity generation and winter shortages. In 2024, Kyrgyzstan was forced to import up to 25% of its electricity due to increased demand and lower hydropower output, while Tajikistan has relied on rolling blackouts to manage supply gaps. In Uzbekistan and other resource-rich states, the challenge lies in over-reliance on gas-fired generations. During extreme cold in January 2023, a surge in demand led to pressure drops in gas networks, causing outages at several power plants and widespread disruptions. Experts warn that climate change is further intensifying these risks. According to the World Meteorological Organization, global temperatures are now around 1.43 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while glacier melt in Central Asia is accelerating, threatening long-term water supplies that are critical for both energy and agriculture. The region is already experiencing more frequent and extreme weather events, including droughts and floods, which are placing additional pressure on energy infrastructure and water resources. Analysts say diversifying energy sources, including expanding renewable energy and improving regional cooperation, will be key to strengthening resilience and ensuring long-term energy security across Central Asia. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, iNews.
Fresh tensions are rising between Georgia's government and its Western partners after a court sentenced opposition leader Elena Khoshtaria to prison in a move that has triggered strong international criticism. Nini Nikolaishvili has the details in Tbilisi.
A court in Tbilisi has sentenced opposition politician Elena Khoshtaria to 1 year and 6 months in prison, a decision that has sparked both domestic and international backlash. Khoshtaria, founder of the DROA party, was convicted for damaging property after writing Russian Dream on an election banner of Tbilisi mayor Kakha Kaladze. She was arrested on September 15, 2025, 1 day after the incident. The verdict comes despite a recent resolution adopted by the European Parliament on March 12th, which called for Khoshtaria's immediate and unconditional release. The resolution, backed by multiple political groups, described her case as politically motivated and expressed broader concern about democratic backsliding in Georgia. It also urged authorities to repeal restrictive laws, investigate alleged abuse of detainees, and ensure freedom of expression. The resolution further raised alarms about the influence of foreign powers and the continued detention of former President Mikhail Saakashvili. Despite these calls, Georgian officials have dismissed the criticism. Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili defended the judicial process, stating that it is shameful to portray offenders as victims and accusing European lawmakers of political bias. At the same time, Georgian opposition parties and civil society organizations have strongly condemned the ruling, accusing the Georgian Dream of undermining democracy and violating fundamental human rights. International reactions have continued to intensify. The Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe has demanded Khoshtarya's release, while other European figures have described the case as an attack on democratic principles. Khoshtarya, who has been in detention since September 15, 2025, maintains that her actions were an expression of political protest. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
All right, after a short break, we'll be taking a closer look at both domestic and international backlash following the court ruling in Georgia. Stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching A News. Just to remind you of one of our top regional stories. A leader of an opposition party in Georgia has been sentenced to a 1.5 years in jail for what the prosecution said was, quote, property damage. The ruling came after the European Parliament appealed for Elena Khoshtarya's release, calling the proceedings politically motivated. To take a closer look at what's happening in Georgia, we're joined by George Mchedlishvili, Associate Professor at the European University, coming to us from Tbilisi. George, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Can you please just bring us up to speed with the case of Elena Khoshtarya? What are the concerns of the international community here? How's the government responding? And what's the opposition saying?
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. Obviously, you said it mostly that according to the criticism mounted by these Western partners and opposition characters in Georgia, so this charge seems to be politically motivated because 18 months for a damage which amounts to about $210, obviously it is ludicrous. And it reflects this, like the growing climate of political polarization in Georgia, very zero-sum, very strict zero-sum approach, when the authorities in quick succession adopted several pretty draconian laws distributing very grave sentences and grave punishments for relatively mild offense. Yes, it was an offense. It was an administrative offense, damaging the property amounting to slightly $200 odd. Yes, it's usually a fine, or it is usually 2 weeks or 15 days detention or communal work. That's what it should amount to. So giving such a grave sentence and, adopting the laws which gives the basis for punishing so harshly this relatively minor offense. Obviously, this is politically motivated. This is the strengthening of authoritarianism in Georgia, and of course, it is a cause for concern.
Well, ever since those contested 2024 election, much has changed. How do you see the situation in Georgia right now?
You rightly mentioned election 2024, parliamentary elections were like a watershed. So the ruling party won with a certain manipulation, certain tweaking of the election, although it was not a mass fraud as opposition figures and like certain members of European bureaucracy suggest. Still, it marked this new stage, new spiral of like political infighting in Georgia. So it became absolutely zero-sum. Yes, I would blame both the ruling party and the opposition being so recalcitrant and so like non-cooperative. So opposition parties seems to pin their hope on the Western parties exclusively, without actually like trying to touch base with their own electorate. So well, generally, okay, it seems that like Georgia entered like the new stage of political, I wouldn't say political unrest, but like political crisis. And unfortunately, there is no way out. There is a very little trust for international institutions like European Union and European Parliament. And probably for a reason, because some of these pronouncements, some of the criticisms like waged against like Georgian Dream and Georgian authorities also seem to be not very fair. So there is always actually not all advices, not all actually propositions are particularly judicious, and therefore there is a little trust on the part of the Georgian authorities. There is a increasingly political damage, increasing political damage caused by the very authoritarian and sometimes draconian measures against political opponents. Yes, these political opponents also, I would say, that misbehave. These political opponents sometimes are being manipulative, demagogical, but there is obviously like no reason to apply such harsh measures. Well, it seems that like Georgia in the crisis, and to a certain extent, I would also put part of the blame on the opposition because they refuse to enter the parliament. Those draconian laws, according to which a person who damages the property can receive 18 months of imprisonment, were adopted because there was no opposition, there was no other political actor in the parliament. They refused to enter the parliament, and of course their presence could prevent certain laws from being adopted.
You mentioned there the relations between European institutions, be it the Commission in Brussels or the Parliament in Strasbourg. The relations with Tbilisi have been cooled for a while now. What's the latest in this standoff of sorts? Are there any indications of any type of warming of ties?
So far, there are like absolutely no indications. So Georgia pinned their hope on this like conservative movement, which were impersonated by Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. Georgia had a pretty reliable and, in my opinion, pretty good partner in the European Parliament. Georgia was associated with the Social Democrats, a center-left party, and themselves, Georgian Dream positioned itself as a center-left party, and they had a reliable partner who were promoting their interest. And few years ago, they decided to sever ties with this political force in the European Parliament, which at the time was the second largest representation in Parliament after European People's Party, and decided to join that movement, which seems to be, okay, I wouldn't say on its last legs, but which doesn't have much of political traction. Probably the current Prime Minister of Hungary will step down after probable loss in election in a couple of weeks, and Georgia will be left without any significant partner, and all the more that since that behavior of the Georgian authorities is becoming increasingly authoritarian, it will be difficult for any political force in Europe to establish ties with them, because it will be reputationally very damaging.
What about Washington? We've just recently heard news of a State Department official visiting Georgia to talk to officials, private sector, civil society. What's Tbilisi's current state of relations with the United States?
Well, it seems that the relations are still on hold because of so much on the plate of the current U.S. administration. Georgia is actually in this lower tiers of priority, I would say. So they still haven't found time for Georgia, and looks like they're still deciding what to do with the current Georgian leadership. So the hope of the Georgian leadership is that the Trump administration is more transactional than based on values, and therefore they will not be creating, I would say, much headache because of the democratic credentials and political liberalism. But for me, the writing is on the wall, and the writing is not particularly promising for Georgia. The very fact that the American vice president, talking of actual officials and the higher-ranking officials, the very fact that Vance visited Armenia and Azerbaijan and omitted Georgia, I think is very telling. Only just a few years ago, it would be unimaginable for a high-ranking U.S. official to visit two capitals without Tbilisi, because Tbilisi was considered, and rightly so, as the most reliable and the most actually trusted partner for Washington. No more.
George, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insight and analysis.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That's all we have for you for now. But stay tuned to A News.